You know this feeling. The video freezes. The circle spins. You wait. It's just lag, you tell yourself. Just the signal, taking its time. But what if the lag was 10 minutes long, and the thing you were watching was not a video, but a rescue mission? And what if, by the time the picture cleared, it was already too late? This is the story of the Ares 7 mission. A fictional account, but built on physics so real, so documented, so mathematically certain, that somewhere in our future, a version of this story will happen. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when. In the year 2061, humanity has established its first permanent research station orbiting Europa, the ice-covered moon of Jupiter. 6 scientists, 1 habitat, and a distance from Earth of approximately 800 million kilometers. At the speed of light, the fastest anything in this universe is permitted to travel. A signal from Europa takes 43 minutes to reach Earth. 43 minutes. Not because our technology is primitive, not because our antennas are weak, because space is that large, because light, though blindingly fast by human standards, is still, measured against the scale of the solar system, almost unbearably slow. Think about it this way. When you send a WhatsApp message and it takes 3 minutes to deliver, you're frustrated. Now imagine you are the mission controller, sitting at a console in Houston, watching a live feed from Europa, and everything you see happened 43 minutes ago. The astronauts you are watching eat breakfast. They finished that breakfast 43 minutes ago. The readouts you are monitoring, they changed 43 minutes ago. The emergency you are about to witness already ended 43 minutes ago. You just don't know how yet. This is not science fiction. This is called signal latency, and it is as real as gravity. When NASA's Curiosity rover lands on Mars, mission controllers on Earth experience what they call 7 minutes of terror, the time it takes for the landing signal to cross the distance between planets. They cannot intervene, they cannot correct. They can only watch and wait and trust the machine to save itself. The Ares 7 mission had 43 minutes of terror. They just didn't know it until it was over. The resupply vessel Hermes 3 had been traveling for 8 months, carrying food, medical supplies, replacement equipment, and most critically, a new power coupling for the station's primary reactor, which had been running on backup systems for 11 days. In 11 more days without that coupling, the station's heating systems would begin to fail. Europa's surface temperature sits at negative 160 degrees Celsius. The crew had 11 days. Hermes 3 was 22 hours away from docking. Everything was on schedule. At Mission Control in Houston, a room of 40 engineers watched their screens. What they saw was a smooth, textbook approach. Hermes 3, closing the distance at precisely the calculated velocity. The station's docking port, open and aligned. The crew of Ares 7 suited up, ready, calm. What they did not know was that they were not watching now. They were watching 43 minutes ago. At 14:07 station time, a micrometeorite, no larger than a grain of sand, struck the attitude control thruster on Hermes 3's port side. Not a catastrophic impact, not a Hollywood explosion, just a grain of sand, moving at 60 kilometers per second, enough to nudge the vessel 0.3 degrees off its approach vector. 0.3 degrees. At the distance Hermes 3 was traveling, 0.3 degrees of angular deviation translated to a positional error of nearly 40 meters by the time it reached the docking port. 40 meters. The docking port was 1 meter wide. The automated collision avoidance system on Hermes 3 detected the deviation immediately. It flagged the error. It calculated a correction burn. It sent a request for manual override authorization to mission control on Earth. And then it waited. The message left Hermes 3 at 14:09. It traveled at the speed of light. It arrived at Houston at 14:52. 43 minutes later. In those 43 minutes, Hermes 3's automated system, waiting for a response that was still traveling through space at the speed of light, had a decision to make. Wait for human authorization and risk arriving too late to correct. Or act autonomously, with incomplete data, without human confirmation on the basis of its own calculations, alone. The system was not designed for this choice. No one had designed for this choice, because no one had fully accounted for what 43 minutes of lag actually meant in a crisis that lasted 11 minutes. At 14:19, 10 minutes after the deviation was detected, 10 minutes after the message was sent, 33 minutes before it would arrive in Houston, Hermes 3's automated system made its decision. It fired the correction burn, autonomously, without authorization, with 43 minutes of lag standing between it and the humans responsible for this mission. The burn was 17% too strong. Not because the system was faulty, not because the calculations were wrong, but because in the 10 minutes between the deviation and the burn, the micrometeorite impact had caused a slow pressure leak in the thruster housing, a leak too small to trigger the damage sensors, but large enough to alter the thrust output by a fraction. A fraction that mattered. At 14:21, Hermes 3 struck the docking port of Ares 7 at a relative velocity of 4.3 meters per second. Not fast by any standard you would recognize. Walking pace. But a vessel massing 4,000 kilograms, moving at walking pace, transfers enough kinetic energy on impact to breach a pressure seal rated for micrometeorite resistance, not collision resistance. The breach was small, 11 centimeters. But in the vacuum of space, 11 centimeters is everything. At 14:22, the crew of Ares 7 began emergency breach protocols. At 14:23, they sealed the inner compartment. At 14:31, after 8 minutes of controlled emergency response, calm, trained, professional, all 6 crew members were safe in the sealed section. The breach was contained. The station was damaged, but stable. Hermes 3 had been pushed off by the impact into a slow drift. The crew sent a transmission to Houston. The message left Ares 7 at 14:31. It would arrive in Houston at 15:14. At 14:52, 21 minutes after the collision, 31 minutes after the breach, 21 minutes after the crew had already sealed themselves in the emergency compartment. The original deviation message from Hermes 3 arrived in Houston. Houston, Hermes 3, we have a minor attitude deviation on approach, requesting authorization for correction burn, awaiting your response. The room reacted immediately. Engineers ran calculations. A correction burn was authorized. The response was transmitted back toward Jupiter at the speed of light. It would arrive in 43 minutes. At 15:07, while the authorized correction burn response was still traveling through space, Houston's screens updated. They showed Hermes 3 completing its docking approach. Smoothly, on vector, perfect alignment. The room erupted. They were watching 14:24. They were watching 3 minutes after the collision. They were watching Hermes 3's post-impact drift, which at that distance and angle looked, on their screens, indistinguishable from a completed docking maneuver. They were watching the past, and in the past, everything looked fine. At 15:14, the crew's emergency transmission arrived in Houston. Houston, Ares 7. We have experienced a docking collision. Breach contained, crew safe. The room went silent. They had been cheering for 22 minutes for an emergency that the crew had already survived, or not survived, entirely on their own, with no possibility of outside help in a window that had opened and closed before Houston even knew it existed. The crew of Ares 7 survived. Let that be clear. They were trained. They were calm. They sealed the breach. They saved themselves. But they saved themselves alone. Because the speed of light, which sounds so fast, 300,000 kilometers every second, was not fast enough to close the gap between a crisis and the people responsible for managing it. Because space is not a room. It is not a building or a city or even a continent. Space is space. And across space, every signal you send, every message, every warning, every desperate transmission travels at the fastest speed the universe permits and still arrives late. This is the reality that awaits every mission beyond the moon. Mars, up to 24 minutes of signal delay each way. Jupiter, up to 43 minutes. Saturn, up to 83 minutes. The nearest star, 4 years. Every mission we send beyond a certain distance crosses what engineers call the autonomy threshold, the point at which real-time human control becomes physically impossible. Not because we lack the technology, because we lack the time, because the universe does not negotiate with light speed. And so the question that the Ares 7 mission forces us to ask, the question that every deep space mission from this point forward will have to answer, is not a technological question. It is not an engineering question. It is a philosophical one. When the lag is 10 minutes long and the crisis lasts 11, who is in control? The answer that the universe gives us is uncomfortable. No one. Or rather, the machine is. The autonomous system. The algorithm. The code written by human hands, tested in human simulations, launched into an environment that no simulation has ever fully captured. As we reach further into space, as our ambitions carry us past Mars, past Jupiter, past the edge of the solar system itself, we will cross autonomy thresholds that make 43 minutes seem like nothing. We will send humans and machines into distances where a round-trip signal takes not minutes, but hours. Not hours, but days. Not days, but years. And in every crisis, in every emergency, in every 11-minute window where everything changes, they will be entirely on their own. The universe is not cruel. It does not delay our signals out of malice. It simply operates on scales that human intuition was never built to grasp. We developed on a single world, a world small enough that sound travels its diameter in 40 seconds, a world where light circles its equator 7 times in a single heartbeat. We are creatures of the immediate, and we are reaching into the infinite. Somewhere in our future, a mission controller will sit at a console and watch a disaster unfold on a screen, and know with absolute mathematical certainty that what they are watching is not now. That the people on that screen have already lived or died, already succeeded or failed, already saved themselves or not. 10 minutes ago, 43 minutes ago, 8 hours ago. And there is nothing they can do but watch and wait and hope that the people they sent out there into that impossible distance were ready. The next time your video buffers, the next time your message takes a minute to deliver, the next time you feel that familiar frustration of a signal taking its time, remember this. Somewhere beyond the frost line of our solar system, light is crossing a distance so vast that by the time it arrives, everything it carries is already history. And we are going there anyway, because that is what we do. The time lag. Like, share, and subscribe to travel with us to alternate future timelines.